All right, guys, I want to explain to you how to create an argument in your paper. This is ultimately going to be the most important part of your paper, and it's also maybe the most difficult. So to start with, let's just review a couple of terms that you should be somewhat familiar with by now. First term would be a thesis. A thesis is the statement at the end of your first paragraph that's going to answer the prompt. The next is the argumentative paragraphs. The argumentative paragraphs is basically going to be your entire paper. And it consists of a topic sentence, which connects which part of the thesis your paragraph is talking about. An introduction to the document. This would just be giving some facts about what the document is. A summary, giving the major points of what the document is. And then analysis, where you would take the information from the summary and show how this information answers the prompt. Ultimately, the analysis is the meat of your argument. We've talked about both of these things previously. But let's talk a little bit more in detail about a thesis. So with the thesis, there are two things that we're going to ultimately try to create. The first one is we want to make sure that we're directly answering the question. So using the wording from the question does help. So for example, if I have a prompt that says something like, for what reasons is Willie's Mr. Murray's favorite restaurant? We would want to answer by saying Willie's is Mr. Murray's favorite restaurant because. See how we're using the words from the thesis or from the prompt to answer it? Now the second thing is a new concept, but we've vaguely talked about it, which is called an argument bucket. An argument bucket is where you're going to try to take multiple documents and have it be represented in the thesis from one point. So let's take this prompt again. For what reasons is Willie's Mr. Murray's favorite restaurant? And let's say in this prompt we had 6 documents. Argument buckets would be something like this. Willie's is Mr. Murray's favorite restaurant because, again, we're trying to use the wording from the question. It has good quality food, it is priced well, and it has multiple convenient locations. Let's say that in these 6 documents, document 1 and 4 would be represented by good food quality. They're both similar in topic. They're both talking maybe about the good amount of food that Willie's gives. Second would be that it's priced well. Let's say there's 2 documents that are kind of linked about pricing. And then the third would have to deal with 2 documents linking about how this is convenient. Now there is another option. This is the less advanced option, and it's where you wouldn't do an argument bucket. And instead, you would do each document being represented in the thesis, and it would contain its own argument. But this is going to make our thesis kind of wordy, and it's also going to make you have to do a lot more analysis. Let me kind of show you. So let's say that right here, this is our less advanced thesis. You didn't want to do argumentative buckets, and instead you just said, nope, I want to just show that each of my documents is represented in my thesis singularly. So you would say Willie's is Mr. Murray's favorite restaurant because it has a wide variety of options for burritos. They do not charge for chips. They have a location 10 minutes away. Their chicken is great. They have a location near Mr. Murray's friend's house, and they will give Mr. Murray free stuff sometimes. So each one of these would represent a different document. So that would represent document 1, document 2, document 3, document 4, document 5, and document 6. So now what you would have to do is you would have to individually argue for each of these documents and explaining how this links to why this is Mr. Murray's favorite restaurant. Again, you can do this. It's not necessarily what I want, but it is an option if the buckets become difficult. But what the buckets are ultimately asking is, are there documents that are related or similar enough to where they could be linked together? Basically cutting down on some of the paragraphs you have to write to where you could begin to say, well, I don't want to say this because I've kind of already said this with document 1. So like, for example, document 1 talks about it has a wide variety of options for their burritos. Document 4 says there's chicken that's great. Both of these are kind of related to the food aspect. And so because of that, I could just talk about their good quality of food in one paragraph and just use document 1 and document 4 one time in one paragraph. Same thing, look at document 2. Document 2, they don't charge for chips, so that has to deal with price. And then look at document 6. They will give Mr. Murray free stuff sometimes. So both of this deals really with price, which if you go back to the previous thesis, it shows that document 2 and document 6 are both linked together from price, which I'll show you in just a sec. All right, so how do we actually create the argument buckets? The first thing you do is you start off by going through each document and you read the introduction, or you create your introduction. And again, the introduction is just giving me a couple of words about what the document is, or details about what the document is, and then a summary. Summary is giving me the major points. When you're doing the summary, it's super important to constantly be thinking about how you're going to use this information. How does it help answer your prompt? How does this link to other information from another document? Constantly be charting out how the document's information is going to answer the prompt's question. The summary is not the end of the paper. It's just the beginning, actually. The analysis is the end of the paper. But we want to do all of the introduction and summaries first before we start on the analysis. And the reason why we want to do that is so that we can start to create our argument buckets together. All right. Once you have identified which documents go together, you can then combine their analysis, because now you would just be doing one paragraph, one topic sentence. You would do each document summary separately, but the analysis would go together, ultimately cutting down time and what you're having to write. So I think you just need an example, so let's go with it. So the prompt was, for what reasons is Willie's Mr. Murray's favorite restaurant? Okay. Let's say document 1, this would be my summary. So I have my introduction right here, a review by a person who has eaten at every fast casual restaurant. He makes a note that Willie's has more veggie options than any of the competition. All right, this is my summary. This is my intro. Document 4, a survey of fast casual restaurants. Again, that's my intro, stating that Willie's has better chicken than the competition. Now, both of these summaries are pretty brief. You could give a little bit more detail, but again, I've made all this up, and I'm trying to fit it all in one PowerPoint. Now, since we see that, the argumentative bucket that I'm going to create is both of these deal with Willie's having a high quality of food and selection. In my thesis, this would be the part of the thesis that I'm arguing. Willie's is Mr. Murray's favorite restaurant because it has good quality food. This would also be my topic sentence. So now that my reader knows that this is part of the thesis that I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the fact that it's priced well or that it has multiple convenient locations. I'm just going to be talking about, in this paragraph, the food and the quality of it. So I would start off with that being my topic sentence when I'm actually writing the paper. I would introduce document 1 and give the summary of document 1. I would introduce document 4 and give the summary for document 4. And then I would do my analysis together. The multiple food options allow for a consumer or customer like Mr. Murray to go there multiple times a week and not get tired of eating there. That's kind of dealing with document 1, right? That there's a lot of different options. The quality of chicken means that he's going to be happy with how it tastes. Both documents show that Willie's quality and quantity of food options are much higher than your average fast casual restaurant, which is ultimately what I am trying to prove with my thesis, which is for what reasons is Willie's Mr. Murray's restaurant. I've been able to use both of these documents together. That's a document bucket, or that's an argumentative bucket. Using argumentative paragraphs, this would be perfect for your paper.